Hi everybody, and welcome back to the second video on Firebase Firestore. Okay, in the previous video, we talked about how to set up your database and how to set up basic security functions in your database. So if we open the project that we did the last time, and we worked on the authentication, we went to the database, and then we enabled the Firestore database. And then there's right now, we don't have any collections. We don't have any tables or databases, if you will. And then we said in the rules, we have a basic rule that says anybody that we will allow anyone on all document to write to our database, all right? So what we're going to do, we're gonna take that registration process and extend it a little farther. It means if I want to add, store additional information about my user, how would I do that? All right. So the way to do it is that you create another table in here, another collection. It's called users, and then you can add any fields that you want in it. I'm not going to do it in here. I'm going to show you how we do it from our own app. So if we go to the app that we were working with, and then this is the app. It's called My First App. And we have one function, and that function called user registration. And then that's the user registration. If it was successful, we do this. If it was not successful, we display the error message. And if it was successful, we display a message saying that user created, all right? So in this part is where we're going to invoke another function, and that function will allow us to store additional information about the user. So just to make sure that we did this in the first video, but I just want to make sure that you have it. In the pod file, you have to make sure that you have Firebase Firestore. So that should be in your pod file. When you do the installation, it would look at this and install all the component for the Firestore. All right, so make sure that you have that in your pod file. If you don't, make sure you add it and then do the installation again. All right. Then we go to the view controller. In the storyboard, we have three screens. We have the navigation controller, we have a view controller that take you here, and we have the registration. So these are the fields right now that I want to store. I'm not going to store all the password, but I'm going to be able to store the name, the email, the phone, and any other information that you want. All right. And then when you click on the register, it calls that function and does the registration. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the modification. First, I want to make sure that I have import Firebase in my view controller. So in order to include the Firestore. So that's the first thing. Second thing that I need to do is that I need to define, you don't have to do this piece, that I do it here because I don't have to repeat it every time. So what I'm doing here, I'm creating a database object. And this database object is basically the Firestore, and create the object Firestore, an instance of it, all right? So I'm creating a database, and that will allow me to use it in my other functions as well. Okay, so make sure you do that part. So if you don't, I don't think we did that in the previous video, so I'm going to make sure that you do this part. All right, here is my registration. I'm going to go at the end. I'm going to create a new function. I'm going to call this function save user details. All right, and this function will receive user ID, unique identifier, and its type string. All right, and in this function, we will save the additional information about that user. So I'm doing two things. I'm showing you how to set up the database and how to all right, you might have heard some screaming. That was my son playing the game. Anyway, so let's continue. So in this function, we're gonna write to the database and then extend that function of registration. So I'm doing two things. Showing you how to use the database to store information and how to add additional information about a particular user. So this is that function that we did last time. It's called login function, the register function. We create we create the user. If the user was successful, we receive a result, or creating the user was successful, we'd receive a result. Otherwise, we receive an error. So we check if the error is, we have an error here, we do this. Otherwise, it means it's successful. So what I'm going to do in here, I'm going to call that function. First, how do I get that user ID that got created? So what I can do this. I can say let user ID equal result dot user, right? And I'm gonna wrap that and UID, all right? I think we're gonna unwrap the result because it's optional. All right, so this will give you, the result will have an object inside of it. It's called user inside of it, and then inside that user, you have actually a user ID. That's the user ID that is created when you go to authentication. Notice here when you go to authentication, that is that ID. So whenever you successfully create a user, you get a unique identifier. And how do you reference that unique identifier? You can get it from the result or from the auth current user. But in this case, we're just getting it from the current user, the user that got created. So now I can go call that function self.reg, and then I'm going to send to it. That save user details, and I'm going to send to it the user ID. All right, user ID. Okay. You want to avoid confusion, UID here, USR ID, and then so you don't get confused. Okay, so USR ID. So what are we going to do in this save users details? What we're going to do first, I need to create for reference to the, I can do it this way. We can say DB database, the object, dot what? We can use the collection. The collection is what? The collection is your table name or database or whatever you want to call it. That is my collection. What is my collection? It's going to be users. All right. Dot what? I'm going to say set a document. What do you put in here in this document? What you put in here is that you need to put an identifier that identify that document. So since we are doing, we are creating additional information about a user, it will make sense to use the document ID of that document to be the same as the user ID. So that way I can relate the two together without having to add another field inside the document and trying to match it. So I can say this, I can say user ID in here. So what happens now? And I'll show you what happens. Basically, you create a document. The name of that document is the same as the user ID. So that way it's an extension of that user details. So what I'm going to say in here, I'm going to say set data. Now set data, there are many handlers here, but I'm going to use one of them, set data, that give me a completion with an error. All right, so this one here. So set data, and then I'll give it the values that I want to set. It's basically a dictionary and a completion handler. So I'm going to take this one. All right, so what are we going to do in here? Basically, you pass all the values, and I'm going to do that, double click here. And then what do? You pass all the values that you want to, the elements, the fields, whatever you want to call them, the attributes as a key value pairs or as like a JSON object. And then you pass this to Firebase, and it will store it basically based on this. So for example, for now, if I'm going to say username, like this, username, and then I'm going to say, just for testing, I'm not going to put any values from the screen right now. So username, and I'm going to say, just put any value. user 123, or I just call it, yeah. So that's the first field. So my first field will be this, and this is its value, all right? Then if I want to add more details, what can I do? I can just simply put, I'm going to put them next to it, so make it more readable. I'm going to put a comma, and then the next value. So if I want to say user phone, and I'm going to give it a value. And then if I want to add more, I can say, for example, if I want to add the age or birth date or whatever, you say age. And I'm going to say 21, I wish, 21. And then I'm going to say maybe address or country. I'm going to put Palestine. This is where I am originally. Okay. All right. So that is how you list the attributes that you want to save in the document, in that document in the user collection. Now here we're going to say you will get an option. You will get an error. And what do we want to do in case we got an error, right? The first thing you should do, check, do you have an error or not? So if you have an error, if error does not equal to error, why do I have two errors? If error does not equal to nil, what does that mean? It means that we actually have an error and you can print a result to the user, or we have a message, right? And then we have self dot message user details dot text. We can say user details were not added, all right? Else we'll say same thing, self.message message.text equal user details were saved. Okay, so there's a lot of processing that you can do beforehand. Of course, you can validate all of this, and you can get these fields from your text field. All I'm doing it for now, just for testing it, make it easy, and then we focus on the process of how do you create additional details, all right? So let's save this, and let's go back, and let's run it and see what happened. Create a user and see if that does actually work or not. So I'm going to put dummy information right now. And I'm going to put name ABC, whatever, password 123, anything, email acd@abc.com. And then phone is any number right now. Okay. So the registration process, what happened when I click on the registration process, it will call this function. Okay, this function right here, this register. If it's successful, it will go here. It will get the ID that was created, and it will call this function below with that ID. This function that we just added basically take the user ID and it will use it as the title of the document, and then sets this attribute in that file. The set data, what happens either if the data already exists, whatever you send to it, basically it updates it. If the document does not exist, it basically creates a new one. So let's run it and see what happens. If I click on register, right now. Let's see what happens. User created, that was the first one. And when it finished the second one, user details were saved. So we are successful. So let's go and check the Firebase and see if we actually got data in the Firebase. So if I do refresh here, we should have the new user, ABC. I called it ACD. This is the one. This is the unique identifier. Notice this is the unique identifier for that guy. So now if I go back to the database, I should see a new collection here called users. The title of that document is the same one. Just look at the first 5, LE5BM. If you look at here, you look at LE5BM, all right? So that's the same user as here, all right? So make sure, that's how you tie the two together. So now if I go back to the database, what am I looking here? I'm looking at the fields that were created for me. I spelled country. Okay, all right, so I'll fix that. So, and these are my fields that I set from the database. Now you can add different information, by the way. So if I go back, so each document can have additional information, which I don't recommend, but I just want to show you, we'll fix that at the same time. So for example, if I go back in here, and then let's add another field here. This guy lives in UAE. And then we have another field called city. And I'm gonna put comma here, and then I'll put Dubai. And then now watch what happens. If we, all right, what's going on here? Because I added the, oh, this should be column here. All right, and okay. All right, so now if I run this again, I will register another user. User action. Anything junk data. We don't want to put something that already exists. And then we want to put, of course, you're going to do, if you're writing a real app, all of this has to be validated, but this is not what we're focusing on. So it should say created and then user saved. Now, if I go here, and then let's take a look at what we've just done. So now I have another user. Notice the other user has more attributes than the first one. Yeah, I don't recommend this, but I'm just showing you that each document can be considered as a unique structure if you want to, but I don't recommend that because that would cause confusion for other developers, all right? So we were able to do this to create a user, an additional user. And why we were able to do that? Because in our document here, we said, I'm going to allow anybody, as long as they have a null user ID, to register, to be able to create documents, all right? But that is not a good way, because that means that anybody that have an ID can change anybody's else data, which is not right, right? We don't want to be able to, we don't want to do that. We want to be able to do that only if, first of all, I can create anybody, I can create user to anyone, I can create as the data as long as you have user ID, but I should not be able to change other people's information. You know, meaning what? Should not be able to change other people's user profiles if I don't have access to it, right? So this rule, we're gonna narrow it down. We're gonna make another rule. And this is a very common rule. It's recommended by Google Firebase. So what we're going to say, we're going to say match what? We have a collection called users now, right? Now, the title of the document is actually a user ID. Okay, so what does that mean to me here? It means that now I'm looking at the user table. So I have a rule for the user table. Okay, what does this rule say? It says I'm gonna allow update, comma, read, comma, update and read only if the request that is coming to me through the other authorization system, their ID is actually equal to the user ID or the title of that document. All right. So now what this say, equal is double equal. What does this say? It says, okay, I'm gonna allow updates and reads of the user's profile only if that user ID, the title of the document, matches the ID that is being sent to me on the request. So that way I guarantee that nobody can update their other people's profiles. What else can you do? You can actually allow create if what? If request ID authorization.id is not equal to nil. This way, I guarantee that I'm not gonna create additional user information unless they already registered with the system. And without this, if you don't do this, that means anybody can write to this table, even though they are not registered. So that rule here, we have two basically conflicting rules here. We have one rule here that talks about basically allow to write to any document based if they are registered with us. And this one says, no, I'm gonna only limit their functionality. So what happens here? If that's the case, it actually will use this one. So we don't want this part here anymore. I'm gonna remove it, and then I'm gonna set security or authority based on what I need only, all right? So this one will guarantee that nobody can update their user profile except the person that created that user profile, all right? And then you can publish this, okay? They still can create, but they cannot update their information. In the next videos, I'll show you how to do that part. How do we update this information? How do we update user information, all right? But for now, this is how we set up the database. How do we set up the rules? How do we invoke the adding the data to the database using the set data, and how to tie the two documents together using the user ID and the title of that document. All right, that is enough for this video. It's very helpful for moving forward, because this is how you structure it. This is how you guarantee that the security of your application, and how to extend user information, not just simple email and a password. All right. All right. I'm going to stop here, and I'll see you on the next video.